Amen. So this past week, I was in Washington, D.C. on some work and went out to dinner with some friends on 2 occasions to some restaurants, and we could hardly hear each other speaking because of the din of Christmas music that the restaurant was playing, kind of mixture of Bing Crosby and O Come, O Come Emmanuel. And it was really quite disturbing. And being in Washington this week was not a lot of fun. The CIA report had just been released, so everybody was in a tizzy about that. And the government, to avoid shutdown, our politicians were making sure that instead of writing checks for $97,000 each, we might be able to write a check for $800,000 each. So it was, Christmas is coming early for Capitol Hill. So in the midst of all that, it was really nice to get back to St. Peter's and to plan the Compline service this evening. We will be in the darkness with the candles lit, and we'll be sharing the service with our brothers and sisters at Grace Church. And we try to find our way in this crazy, dark time that we are in, a nation and a world. And I like to think about this journey that we're on. It's like a deep forest. You drive around these wonderful roads around this community in those deep, dark forests. That Advent is kind of an invitation to go down these roads into the center of the mystery we call God. And the sentinels that the lectionary gives us today are 2 extraordinary figures, the figure of Isaiah and the figure of John the Baptist, guarding the entrance to the deep, dark forest. And we're invited in. And it's scary and it's dark, but their words are powerful words. And they echo through the ages. That incredible manifesto from Isaiah that Jesus uses for his first sermon is a kind of mission statement of the church, that we judge how successful we are in terms of how we fulfill the mandate that Isaiah's vision's about. And we owe so much of being here today to John the Baptist. We have the Advent candles, the light is in the baptismal font. And often when we get lost, the baptismal covenant brings us back to what our real values in the world are about. And there are a lot of questions out there, questions about the value of human beings, questions about is it okay to torture human beings for the common good. And I find that coming back to the theology of baptism can really help us. Will you seek and serve Christ in all persons, loving your neighbor as yourself? I will, with God's help. Will you strive for justice and peace among all people and respect the dignity of every human being? I will, with God's help. And I imagine St. Peter's, when you turn this building upside down, we're a cradle. We're a little manger as we're moving into the Christmas season. The cradle of hope in the midst of a scary, dark world. And if we put it back on its foundations, John Reed and I were having a breakfast conversation about a month ago, and John said, yes, it's also the pivot of possibilities. So St. Peter's, it was wonderful to come back to that centering again, to be the cradle of hope and to be the pivot of human potential and possibilities. And we're going to be thinking about that in this coming year. What does that mean for you in your life to share in the cradle of hope? What does it mean in your life, the fulcrum of possibilities? And we're going to be exploring that with those people who have children in this community, those people who are concerned about the sharing of the Christian faith as we move forward. And we're going to have 2 meetings in January thinking about that. And so I invite you to think about that in your own ministry here. How is your ministry and your life and your work a cradle of hope and a fulcrum of possibilities and potential as we move into the future? And I want to focus a little bit. I talked a couple of weeks ago about Isaiah, but I want to talk about John the Baptist because he is a very, very powerful character. And Jesus' identity is defined by John the Baptist and by Isaiah. And it is because of that that our identity, that our inclusion in the community of the baptized, the community of the righteous, makes sense. And I was intrigued by this word righteousness because righteousness has a negative connotation. We talk about being self-righteous, and we don't like to use the word righteous. But the meaning of righteousness, the kind of meaning that John the Baptist preached about and Jesus talks about, is about a sense of relationship with the larger community. We are righteous not because of anything we individually necessarily do, but righteousness is about the covenant that the community makes together and how we then respond and live out that commitment. Again, back to baptismal covenant. In a couple of weeks, on the 28th of December, we're going to be baptizing a little baby here. So we'll actually get to practice and renew our own baptismal covenant. So the Advent candles will go and the Christ light will be lit, and St. Peter's will be celebrating a baptism. And many of you know this font is one of the oldest relics of this community that was saved from a fire. And so we are kind of renewing and centering ourselves on what this means, and we owe that so much, not only to our ancestors, but to John the Baptist as well. There are many schools of thought about who John the Baptist was, and some people see him as really an outsider, a bit of a little crazy guy. Jack Banning did a great job last week describing this kind of Elijah-like figure. But there's another school of thought, and it's based on the images of John the Baptist from Luke's Gospel, that he was actually a person of great importance in his day. And his father is part of the high priestly order of the temple, Zechariah. His mother is Elizabeth. Historically, they are linked he's a descendant of Aaron from the great priestly family. So he's an aristocrat. He is a person of privilege. And Herod had just built this very grand temple that took years to build, and John's inheritance was to run that temple, that he would have succeeded his father Zechariah. So there's a whole other school of thought that John was not an outsider, he was an insider, but that he realized that the world order and the religious order of his day was not going to make it. It was not sustainable. And this withdrawing into the desert, we know a little bit about, historically, there's some writings in Josephus. So Josephus gives John the Baptist more importance, actually, than Jesus. And Josephus talks about moving out of the city into this alternative community. And we think it may be the Essenes. There was a kind of movement at the time that influenced John the Baptist and influenced Jesus. They may have been a part of it, called the Essenes. And basically you had professional people, women, children, single, married, moving out of society that they felt was going to collapse, and establishing a new community. And baptism was the rite of purification to celebrate righteousness in this new community of faith. And they also had a meal that they shared together, rather like our Eucharist. So the Essene community was something that John, Josephus, and Jesus probably would have been familiar with. And John was a very popular person. And one of the things that Josephus writes about, it's because he has an enormous following that Herod is threatened by him. The king is threatened by him because he could lead a revolt against his government. And that's the reason why John is put to death. Now, one of the things that I'm learning about this community is that many of you are very active in New York City, and you are involved in many different aspects of the great life of that city. And part of coming to St. Peter's is to kind of anchor you in another value system, where you can reflect and think about, how do we live together as human beings? What is the value that we have for one another? What is the value of human exchange? And that's all up for grabs right now. And it's very, very important. And in a way, the St. Peter's community and this wider community is almost a modern-day Essene community, where we have withdrawn, not completely, but we have withdrawn from the city to reflect on where we are going as a human family. And the Spirit of God is calling us. So in many ways, the community of the Baptist and the community of the Essenes is related to what we are doing here today. So I want us to think about that in terms of this year ahead as we go forward. What does it mean to share in the baptismal covenant? In the old days in the church, we used to baptize children in private. It was seen as a family affair. And the wisdom of the church said, no, you know, baptism is a community event. It's a celebration. It's about being admitted into something larger. And so we're very excited that Jimmy Chris's family is providing us with a candidate that we can explore that again and use our font, and to think about that as this kind of keel or this anchor in this very dark forest that we are in. So the light of Christ is coming. There is Advent hope. We are the cradle of hope. We are the fulcrum of possibilities. Amen.